welcome back to Mortgages Made Easy. I am joined today by our Managing Director, David Jackson. Also with us is Alan Deering from Berkeley Homes, who's the Sales and Marketing Director. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have you with us. Tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get into this role and how did you get into new builds to kick us off?
I mean, first of all, I actually started in the industry from a weekender in an estate agency, local to sort of where I was living, whilst working another job, and I'm a qualified mechanic technically.
Oh, wow.
So don't quote me on that ever again. But yes, I am. And then that sort of progressed out from being sort of a weekender to doing like sales progression in the back. And then I felt that I was actually better than the salespeople on the front. So then jumped out to the front, started sales as an estate agent.
Yeah.
And quite quickly sort of then realised actually, it was a great learning curve for me. But new builds just had more to give. More progression, more opportunity. And at that point in time, when I jumped into new build, it was very much like there weren't a lot of guys that were on the foreground in sales in new build at that point. So actually, that transition was quite an interesting transition for me. And I've worked for a few different developers in my time in the industry so far, but I've always rooted back to Berkeley. So I've actually worked for this company twice now, and for the same region. Just because I felt that as a region and as a company, it just resonated with me as to the product, about what they're about as a company and what they want to achieve. And then also just my own internal values about what I want to achieve in the future.
Oh, fair enough. So what was it specifically about new builds that sort of stood out to you?
I think from a new build perspective, it's just the fact that you're delivering something where a customer's had a chance to customize it in a certain sense before they've moved in. I don't like doing DIY like the best of people. So actually, taking that away from the customers to have to do the DIY from the get-go is always important as well.
As a former mechanic, that must be quite...
Yeah, indeed. But, I just think it just makes it seamless for the customer as best as possible. Obviously, they are having to use their imagination to a certain extent, but actually that can be quite fun.
Yeah.
That's when they become quite creative as a customer, and you can be part of that journey with them.
I was going to ask, how involved do you get as that part of them creating their own space?
When I first started in the industry, it was from start to finish. So I would actually pick up a customer's inquiry, whether that came through Rightmove or whatever it might be, and you would progress that customer from initial interest in, I'm looking at secondhand, I'm looking at new build, and then going through those comparisons all the way through to the point where they're picking their tiles for their bathrooms, they're picking their kitchen colours and designs. And then, some people want to bring interior designers, and then you're working with them to sort of bring all the pieces together. And then all the way to handing over their home, and handing over those keys, in any estate agency type role is just such a great feeling.
Yeah.
And I've always loved that sort of end goal for the customer and being part of that journey.
What still surprises you, having been working with new builds and stuff like that, but what still surprises you about buyers today compared to when you first got into this?
I think the main thing that seems to be the most surprising for me is that they don't do any pre-education before they jump into buying a property. Generally, what tends to happen is they might get gifted a deposit, or they're taking some time to save a deposit. But actually, they've gone in to start looking at properties, and they actually have never spoken to a mortgage advisor. They've never spoken to a solicitor to look at the overall journey. They just go in blind. And whilst that's good from my perspective, because I can be part of the educational process, it still surprises me today that people don't start educating themselves before they jump in.
What extra hoops does a buyer need to do to buy a new build versus, obviously we all know from a mortgage perspective, but what extra hoops do they have to do to buy a new build?
I think the key difference is the longevity of your time in a contract. So obviously when you first engage on a new build, and depends on the developer, from a Berkeley perspective, we can sell anywhere from ready now to actually 24 months off plan. I've worked for developers that actually are selling from ready now to only up to 12 months. So depends on the developer, but it's the longevity of the time that they're waiting for their home to be ready, because actually the legal process can be quite quick, which is the benefit to the customer. Actually, within a month and a half, they can go through the whole legal process. They can have got their mortgage in place and feel that security, but it's waiting for their property to be ready. If it's off plan, that can be the most challenging for the customer, because there's nothing for them physically to see other than a show home if one is ready at that point.
Do you get many? Do you often find that obviously that's a big challenge? Obviously, that massive waiting period.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest or most common issues that come up during that period? Say it's all been agreed, it's all going smoothly, but because that time frame is so long, what are the sort of the most common challenges that come up?
Probably the most common would be the fact that the customer wants to see the property at all different stages of the build. Yeah. And actually it's our job as the experts and the people on the ground to guide them at the best points to see their home. Because actually, if you take a customer into a property too early, if say that it's not been painted, even like a white mist coat or something of that nature, it can be quite dark. So then the space feels very different to when it's finished or when it's even had a lick of paint.
Yeah.
So that can be quite challenging. And then also before you hit that moment where you're handing over the keys, we're very much going through that process to make sure that the property is in the best state that it possibly can be. It's a hand-built product. It's not going to be completely perfect, but we want to make sure it's as good as we possibly can get it.
Yeah.
There are going to be things that come up, but if a customer goes in prior to us being ready, they can start making their lists, and actually it becomes quite frustrating for them and it ruins the journey. We'd rather sort of have those staged approach towards people seeing their property at the right stage.
So what are the stages you would actually prearrange another viewing, as it were?
Yeah, so it depends again on the property developer. I think for us, we try and get them in sort of as we get to a point where the property has been signed off, by building control, by local planning, etc. We've gone through those stages. We've gone through the property to make sure that from our perspective, it looks its best. And then leading just before we serve notice, we generally would then try and sort of arrange a visit for the customer to come in, make sure they're happy with what they see. And then we'll look to serve notice from that point. So then they've got generally about 2 weeks on average to then sort of start preparing themselves to then start moving into that property.
And when would the buyer actually do a snagging list? Is that once they've bought, or would they do a snagging list beforehand, or would you do that?
So technically, from a consumer code perspective, actually a customer can do it from the point that we say the property is signed off and it's built complete. But to be honest, snagging lists is a topical subject in new build, and I think this is what goes around online. Actually, when you employ a snagger to come and snag your property, actually they are employed to come and get a certain amount of items on a list. That can be small, it can be medium, it can be major items, it can be a real range. Whereas actually the best way to really understand your home and understand if there are, I would say, defects, then it's to be in it. That snagger's not, it sounds corny, but that snagger's not going to sit on your toilet and see it from a different height. It's not going to be sat on the sofa and see it from a different height there. So actually just live in it for a bit. It is a hand-built product. There's a lot of water that goes into building properties, so it has to go through a drying out period. And you're going to notice those things yourself better than a snagger. But technically, absolutely, they can get someone in to come and have a look at the property. But it is a lot of money. And actually, you're going to notice that what's right for you and what you're happy to accept and what you're happy
Great
to
advice, yeah.
What do you find that buyers typically sort of misunderstand most when they hear new build?
I think that they typically think that the developer is out for the developer in lots of ways, and like that actually they're just buying into a house. And actually certainly with Berkeley, and this is the reason why I've rooted back to this company, is because for me it goes beyond the brick and mortar. Like actually we're placemaking in this instance. It's about the bigger picture of the development. It's not just about their specific home. And actually, if you're buying into a home, whether that's secondhand, whether that's new build, you should be buying into the location. That's when I bought my home, and it happens to not be a new build in this instance because they're not building there. But I'm buying into the local schools. I'm buying into the community that's established there. And when we're delivering a new build, I think people don't feel that there's going to be a community. But actually, I've seen some of the best communities on new home sites, because we generally, make a point, and us as a region, of doing quarterly events with our customers, bringing them together before they move in, doing a summer event with them, doing a Christmas event with them, Easter, and actually the community that you build from that is amazing. And if you're moving into secondhand, you don't necessarily get that as much. It's a bit more of a process.
I suppose from a secondhand perspective, it does feel like you're moving into someone else's space. You're almost taking their space. Whereas because it's new build, you're all moving
in together, aren't you?
You're all moving in at the same hopefully at the same time.
Over a staged approach, but roughly at the same time overall.
And then you can kind of build and grow from there. I mean, I remember when we went down to the Reading Riverworks development, came along, and community and sort of lifestyle was a massive sort of point that was really sort of pushed out from the team down there, which is really, really good, because I think a lot of people, as you said, that is a big sort of misconception, that they don't think you're going to get that with a new build. You're just moving into the property itself and there's nothing else around it. But that was definitely one of the biggest selling points was down there. So that's really, really nice to hear. And I think a lot of buyers will be just don't know about that kind of stuff. Where you get a new build, what generally offers value compared to what sort of sometimes gets as unfair criticism, if that makes sense?
I suppose the lead time on your moving into your home, actually that can be seen as a benefit, to be honest. And I think that we get criticised that, my home is taking too long to be built, or I just want to get in there, and people get impatient naturally. I would be the same, to be honest, and I'm in the industry. But actually, from a first-time buyer perspective, that's actually a really good thing. They've got time to prepare themselves. They've got time to make sure that they've got the right mortgage product in place. Because if mortgage rates as they are right now, it's really challenging to make sure that you're getting the best rate. And actually that lead time, whether that's 6 months, 12 months or beyond, you've got time to chop and change and make sure that you've got the right product, and you've saved enough to move into your home and have the right furniture and personalize it to what you want.
Yeah.
But we can get impatient naturally.
Does that frustrate you?
Not really, I'll be honest, because I think it's human nature.
Yeah.
And you've got to put yourself in their shoes. And that's, most of the time when we're speaking to our sales team, it's always understand it from their perspective. They're just excited. They just want to be in their home and start sort of building their life there. Certainly if it's a first-time buyer, it's their first ever home. It's exciting. Let's be excited for them and manage their expectations in the correct way.
Common sort of mortgage and finance hurdles do you think people come up against on new builds in particular?
Timing.
Yeah.
Timing is the biggest thing, because ultimately, if you are buying something that's over 9 months off plan, then you're going to struggle to submit an application for a mortgage. It's all about, again, us being part of that journey with them and not badgering them, but making sure that they hit the milestones, because if they submit their application too early, it's going to expire. I think that is a massive issue in the market, that I don't think actually from a UK perspective we give enough time from a new build on mortgage product. Personal view. But it's just making sure that the customer does things on time, and if they leave it too late, then they're going to struggle to get the money.
So what comfort can you give a buyer, bearing in mind they could be exchanging 2 years before they actually get the keys? And like you said, mortgage lenders don't wait around that long with a mortgage offer.
I think the thing that we make a point of doing for anyone that requires a mortgage, or actually even our cash purchasers, we do generally get them to speak to a mortgage advisor, a broker, to make sure that they've at least explored the avenues before they commit to purchasing a new build. Because of, say, if it's 2 years off plan, actually they're nowhere near submitting an application for the mortgage. And yes, okay, things can change in the market up and down on mortgage rates, and naturally it's a risk, but at least exploring it in the first instance and having an initial conversation, running affordability. They're not going into an exchange of contracts and binding contracts, having not actually explored the avenues first and know that they can afford the property. Because I think people think, well, it's 2 years off plan, that can wait. Yeah, it'll be fine. And actually, it's just best to have the conversation.
Are there any actual, with the 2 year sort of scenario, are there actually any loopholes during that period of time for someone that's been around a bit and did the job during the credit crunch era, where I think the market did go the other direction and someone may have exchanged a couple of years before? What are there actually any sort of things for a buyer to give them any safety?
I think there is a risk. Naturally, if you're buying that far off plan, there is a risk that obviously prices could go down, but there's also the benefit that the prices could go up.
Yeah.
So you're going into it in both hurdles. I'm not going to be, as a developer, saying, well, actually, the price has gone up, I want you to pay more for the property. In the same way, the buyer can't necessarily come back after exchange of contracts and say, well, actually, the price has gone down. I want you to devalue the property and I want some of my money back. There's a risk from both sides.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going into the basis of buying a new build on that basis, like knowing those sort of key markers, and you were in it for the end goal for yourself, whether that's for self-use, investment.
Yeah.
It's keeping that end goal.
Well, if you'd bought straight away, you'd have gone through that market. It's just being able to then transact at the end of the 24 months or where it may be, isn't it, really? And I guess being flexible on deposits probably a way around it.
Yeah, I mean, also from our perspective, different sites have different levels of deposit and commitment. If it's a really, really high value development, and obviously, there's probably a larger deposit that you have to put down. So we generally would look at 10, 20% if it's over sort of 12 months of from build completion. If it's a lower value product and say a one bed, in Slough, something of that instance, then there's obviously less deposits that we generally ask for overall. But it does depend on the stage of build as well.
Mm.
There's often a big sort of talking point about the price points from second-hand units to new build, and obviously there's a premium price on new build properties in general.
Yeah.
What do you think it's a fair comparison in terms of you're buying something brand new, so you're expected to pay the premium?
I think that people in today's market and when they're buying property, they expect that premium, and I think that yes, some people could feel like it's unfair. When I'm pricing a development, I generally am looking at local area comparables. I'm making sure that we're in line with the market. Yeah. Yes, there is a slight premium associated with that, but you're the first ever person to have that home. It's untouched, it's new, it's customized to you. And so there is a benefit to that for the customer. And as I said earlier, we're not just building the property. In a lot of our developments, whether that's London, the Midlands, or the Southeast or Southwest, we're building more than just that home. We're building residence facilities on some of our sort of high-rise developments, such as concierge, gyms, or even in our more traditional settings, outside areas like new play parks and country parks. I mean, we've just finished a development in Bracknell in Warfield, and that had a 65-acre country park that
Wow.
we made a point of delivering as part of the overall picture to build on the community. So it's more than just a home.
Do you ever get, obviously there's once obviously an offer's been agreed and mortgage application's been in, obviously the surveyor has to go around and see the property and give their estimations on the valuation. One of the things obviously they can't see, and we've talked about this before, obviously about the community and the local area and stuff like that. How is it? What are the conversations that you and your team or your people at Berkeley are having with the surveyors in terms of letting them know, well, this is what's going to be here? Do you think that does play a factor, or do they still just keep it to the property itself?
I think it does play a factor, because anytime a surveyor does come through the door, whether they're a regular, because you get some regulars that come through, or a new surveyor, we do take time to go through the overall development, make sure they're aware of the facilities that are there, and then also take them through comparables of what we've sold today. So when they're valuing that property, they're valuing it based on all merits, price as well as the overall picture of the development.
Do you think it's hard for, obviously as you've mentioned before, obviously you don't want to send buyers around to properties too early because of the way that it's presented? The same could also be said for the local community, or what the actual development's going to look like as a whole, because they go to it too soon. It's just a building site, so it's hard to. I can imagine it's just hard to imagine what it would be like to feel like it. Is there anything that you can do, or that you do to kind of help them sort of visualize it and make and feel part of it?
Yeah, I'll be honest. This has been a massive journey from my time in new build, in the tools that we use in order to help the customer make informed decisions. From where I started, and I started in a more sort of it's still a national house builder. It was a bit more family run, not that much in respect to collateral that you could give a customer. It was all really basic CGIs, a bit of paper. So, okay, here's your house type at best. And then a site plan on a table like this. You'd be like, well, okay, there's your plot. And it was color coded 2, 3, 4 bed houses. Whereas now, some of the technology in the market right now, and Berkeley really invest hard in this technology. I use an interactive that I can take around the world if I wanted to. And I can go into one of my apartment blocks. If it's a 1-bed apartment, I can go around the site using CGI technology. We get drones to go up before we even start on site to get views from every apartment and every angle. So one of my customers could be like, actually, I want to have a look at that 1-bed, and I want to know what the view is from my balcony or my bedroom window. And we've got that asset available.
Wow.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
I would never be without the system now. Berkeley have always invested hard in collateral, and we used to do probably more like 3D models on the site. But I suppose actually with technology as it is, and it's forever improving, we can do that digitally. They can sit in the comfort of their own home. I can provide them with a link to a selection of properties that we feel that meets their criteria and what they want from their new home. And they can sit and study it themselves. They can look at the views. They can look at the layout. You can look at color choices as to what our color palettes we have to offer. It's amazing now.
And I suppose it's different when you've got, we were talking about it before, but with buyers that you've got coming in from overseas, they often don't have the luxury of just being able to pop down to the site to look at the 3D model, to walk around the showroom. They need to be able to do it interactively from wherever they're based.
Absolutely.
So having those tools is a massive
Yeah, I mean,
advantage to you.
I spent quite a lot of time over the course of the last couple of years sort of flying overseas and catering not only just for our UK market but also our overseas market, because we cater to both in the type of product that we're offering. And we've seen obviously a huge draft and a lot of people wanting to come to the UK for all the best reasons, and we should be proud of that. But they are buying very much off plan, like even more so than a UK purchase.
Do you think they're buying more off plan than they are sort of second homes now?
I mean, most of the time they never get an opportunity to see anything. So like everything is based on what we provide them in the room or what we provide them on a Teams or a Zoom call. So some of this technology that I'm now able to put in front of my customers, whether that's UK based or international, they're just getting an opportunity to really understand it, and they're making informed decisions more than ever.
So what percentage of people are buying without actually seeing the site from overseas?
Probably, I would say, and it has shifted over the course of the last year. We're seeing more people that are wanting to visit before they make the sort of final commitment to exchange naturally. But I mean, at sometimes we've set at like 80% of our customers overseas would never even see the property until they come and got the key.
80%.
It has shifted slightly, as I say. So we're probably looking at more like 60% of people.
That's still very high though.
It is, but then
Still very high.
I suppose for them, they're moving into a new location. If they are relocating, or if it's for an investment, they just don't get the opportunity. These people, they generally like working hard. They've to relocate and pay for it. It's a lot of money to come to the UK. So actually, they are like really professional people.
So I guess it's more of a numbers decision now than a heart decision, isn't it? It's looking at do the numbers work? Is it that area fine?
I think that's where it starts.
Takes the emotion out, doesn't it? So
yeah, the numbers is where it really starts for a lot of our customers. But actually, because of the new technology, they are actually able to make more of an emotional decision now with the technology than they ever have before.
Something that most of the other guests that we've had on the podcast have been sort of very London centric, and we've talked a lot about the buy-to-let or the investment market, and how much of a sort of backseat it feels like it's taken in the last sort of few years within London. Obviously, you mentioned around sort of 60% of buyers are buying sort of off-plan stuff that they never go and visit. Out of that sort of range of those type of buyers, how many are buying as investments, and compared to how many are buying it for themselves or for family members to live in?
Yeah, I think
would you estimate?
It really depends on the development. I suppose within the Berkeley Group, we're probably one of 2 regions that have probably the broadest product type. I concentrate all my efforts. So I sell out of London, so like Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, Oxford, down to Bath. We've just opened, and my product ranges from we've got beautiful traditional houses in like more suburban settings. I've got then more larger regenerations of old gas holders that are now like apartment schemes on the River Thames or on the River Avon in Bath, with facilities on site like concierges, etc. And then we then go to the other side of the market, which is then a really high-end development in somewhere like Sunningdale, Ascot. And the motivations are just so different between the different product types. if you look at my high rises, I would probably say about 60% of those are investors at this point in time, especially if you're further off plan, because they're the ones that are the numbers driven people. They know they want the returns on investment for rental, but they also want the capital growth appreciation securing today's value and price. If it's more of a traditional houses site, like they're buying, it's more an emotional purchase. You know, they're going to be maintaining that home because they've got back gardens, they're maintaining their garages, etc. So it probably leans more towards your owner occupier. And then somewhere like Sunningdale in Ascot, it's a bit of both. Like a lot of our customers there, whilst we do get a really good overseas pull from your second homers owning in central zone 1, zone 2 London, we also see a lot of downsizers in the market that own, you know, large scale gated properties in Ascot and like Virginia Water that just want lock up and leaves now. They want to better enjoy their life, enjoy retirement, and actually somewhere like Sunningdale is a nice setting to do it because they don't have to worry about maintenance anymore of those old properties that they used to own, and they can just lock it up and go.
Yeah. In terms of the sort of the investment side, how are you using comparables in order to sort of estimate what the rental expectation is going to be on the properties that come through?
Again, we work slightly different to the sort of London model, to when it's in the out of London side. So with our customers, I always, when we're looking at valuing a project, we always value it based on, okay, what is today's market price on rental? We then also look at sort of appreciation that's expected in that area. So for instance, I'm just about to put to market at the end of this month a brand new development in Bath. No, we have never done a private project in Bath before. So I'm having to then look with local agents, because, you know, we're just getting to know the area ourselves, on what the capital growth element is, what the rental growth is expected over the next 5 to 10 years. And then we use that data within our collateral to say, actually, we've looked at 2 or 3 agents locally. This is the data that they've given us. One is, say, like a large scale agent, JLL, Knight Frank, etc. And then the other 2 might be like local agents because they know the area better than anyone. And so I can give a today's value. This is what you could rent it today, and this is what's expected by the time you hit completion. So it might be 2027, 28, and you can expect, let's say Bath, I give 2 figures, today's value, conservative estimate at 4% growth, which I think is naturally in the market in the rentals at the moment. And then what the agents have told us the growth would be. So that is actually like 7% on an annual growth for their rental. So we try and give them as much data to make an informed decision as possible, especially if it's off plan.
Okay. What feels harder in today's market than it did, say, 2-3 years ago or 4-5 years ago? What feels sort of more trickier to kind of get around?
I suppose mortgages. It's the interest rates, you know, and also the product for people to get onto the ladder. I think that's really changed. I think Help to Buy coming off the offering in the UK was a massive transition for people getting on the ladder. You know, they need bigger deposits. The mortgage rates then obviously went up, and, you know, it's just become a little bit unaffordable for people, to be honest, and it's harder for people to get onto the ladder. Do you think
buyers are just being more cautious? Are they being a bit more demanding, or is it just a case of they're just not informed enough as to what's actually out there? Because when we look at mortgage from a mortgage perspective, there are thousands of different products out there, and you've got hundreds of lenders offering so many different types of mortgages and offering different ways for people to get onto the ladder. So do you think it's a case of buyers now are they're upset that they've missed the boat from when it was more accessible because of the Help to Buy and because of all that kind of stuff? Or do you think it's because they're just not as informed?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think there's always that real tricky element when people are purchasing a property is, I'm going to wait because I'm going to wait for the house prices to go down, and then I'm going to get that property for cheaper. And it's sometimes playing the waiting game isn't the right game.
No.
And, you know, then when the time comes around for them to be, actually, I'm going to make a decision, the market could have gone up, mortgage rates could have changed dramatically in the wrong direction from their perspective. So I think that's one element. But then also, it is uninformed. Like, people are just not informed anymore. And I touched on it earlier. I think when people look in buy into a property, they focus so much on the property prices going down that they never actually necessarily do the research from the start to know, what do I need? What do I need from a mortgage perspective? What's out there in the market? And if they were better informed, then they would make a decision to go quicker and make decisions faster.
So just on that, so from a mortgage perspective, what does a new build buyer need to do extra from a mortgage to get a mortgage from your perspective?
There are certain products in the market, as you guys would know, that actually give better rates towards new build because of the improved EPC ratings that you can get. It's more sustainable as a product, like as
Green
a home.
mortgages out there now, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that's one element, but there are hoops to jump around on that. So from our side, we have to make sure that when we come to a build completion status, that we give the EPC rating and it meets the right level of EPC and energy performance for the lender, which, I mean, I've never had the issue to date, and I hope I never do.
Touch wood.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's just considering the right products, to be honest. There's not really any additional hoops other than the timescale of
length of mortgage offer for some
Absolutely.
lenders are just more better at it.
I mean, as a developer, again, touch wood, we're always really good at setting a really completion dates at the right levels and really considering the build program and weather permitting changes and delays, etc. So we do give a really good buffer. Unfortunately, again, it's another misconception that actually developers are just going to give them the wrong date and their mortgage is going to expire and it's all going to go wrong. And okay, there are instances in the market that are like that, but again, it's going with the right developer. And I think brand is everything when it comes to new build, to be honest. It's one from a product and a delivery perspective, what quality of the home am I getting, but also in the making sure that you're with a developer that is giving you the right information and guiding you through the journey in the right way.
So just on that again, so the actual completion date, how set in stone is that? You've just alluded to weather delays and stuff like that can happen. Yeah. What's your sort of percentage of actually hitting that date, and generally for a longer completion date, how close to it would you be, would you say? Is it hard to ascertain?
Yeah, it's hard to ascertain. What we tend to do with our customers is we always give them like a build window. Yeah. So when we start the journey with the customer, and it depends on where we are in the process of the build of the property and also what type of property, a house or an apartment. But generally it's a window that might be 3 months, it might be like a 2-month window or even a 1 month. So it's all about giving them the right window. And then as and when we hit the build stages, so that's a roof going onto the property, it's the painting of the property, we narrow that window down. So it goes from being a 3 month down to a 2, down to a 1. And then it's right, okay, good news. You've known that your completion is anticipated to be in March, let's say, for instance. We're now ready to serve notice. Actually, your home has been signed off. We've done our quality control checks to make sure it's ready for you to move in. And we can serve notice, and this is the date that we anticipate to do so. And then 10 days later, working days later, this is your home. And then we're there to guide them through the process after.
Okay. What do you think would actually sort of unlock more new build transactions? If you could have a magic wand and you could say, right, this would really help us unlock more people buying, more people looking to get new build stuff, what would it be?
I think it's a change in perception in new build. I think that people just, it's that fear of the unknown and not knowing when my property is going to be ready, etc., and taking that leap and understanding it. Spend some time with us, come and see us. To be honest, on average, we have multiple visits for customers to make a decision. I think people think that they're going to come into a marketing suite and see one of my sales team and we're just going to hard sell them. That's actually not our approach at all. If they come and spend some time with us, we can help them to inform them. If that's 1 visit, if that's 5 visits, whatever it takes, we're there to help them.
Why do you think people have that perception of going into an agency?
They associate even new builders, they're going into an estate agent. That my sales team on the site are actually going to be a traditional estate agent in the UK.
Yeah.
And actually that's not the case. We've got
what's the biggest sort of glaring difference between the two?
I think, to be honest, I'm an ex-estate agent, so I'm not going to put them down. They do a really good job, in the majority. But I think the key difference is my team are there for a whole buying journey from start to finish. They're there as an aid through the build program and making sure that you're informed as to the roof has just gone on your home, and it's all those nice touch points. So actually, they're very nice people. They're really humane. Sounds silly, but actually they want to be part of the journey with the customer, and they pride themselves on it. And I suppose the common misconception with estate agents is they just want their estate agent's fee. It's all they care about. They don't care about the person. And I don't actually think that's the case in general. I think there's some people out there that can be like that, but that's with everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're there to help.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think there's always going to be a general opinion on people that work in this sort of sector. So I think it's letting them understand, and I guess it sort of leads on to what can you do, or what can sort of we do as to sort of help people understand the difference between the two.
It's more collaborative approach.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, in the last couple of years, we've seen a massive change in the way that companies work together. Say, like from my company with, working with you guys on a mortgage front, and, working with tax advisors to make sure people are making, if it's investment, they're making the right taxes, returns, and they understand it.
Mm-hmm.
It's making sure that, and that's one thing that New Build do well. We tend to make sure that we've got people that like to refer someone to. So first time buyer comes into my marketing suite, actually, we'll ask them, have you spoken to a mortgage advisor? Have you spoken to a solicitor? Have you looked at what the costs are and understood those costs? It's not that I want to make sure that they're ready to buy. It's actually to make sure that when they make the decision to buy, they've done so by speaking to the right people. And that collaborative approach really comes in, and more than ever now.
Yeah. But if they've walked in the door, they've sort of made the decision they are thinking about buying, and they do need to be ready to buy. So getting the right advice is actually key, isn't it? It's like, right, you've walked in the door, now you need to know how to actually go to the next stage if it's of interest to you.
Yeah, but I think with New Build in particular, people walk through the door not ascertaining that they're actually making a decision.
Right, just window shopping.
Yeah, there's a lot of window shop, especially with New Build, because of the product is there. They can just walk into a marketing suite. There's a beautiful show home that's interior designed, and I want to come and look at your lovely interior design. And actually, a lot of times when people just window shop, they do end up falling in love with it. And then we see a lot of purchasers that have just come in to see the interior design. And they're like, actually, it's stunning. I love what the development consists of and what it has to offer. I'm actually going to buy. So yeah, it does convert off the back of that.
So along those sort of lines Phil's just been asking, the whole thing of 1.5 million homes to be built, announced by our lovely government. Have you actually seen any signs in the last 18 months of this actually being helping these targets to be hit from your side of things, and how achievable is it?
I mean, on the achievable front, it obviously goes wider than us. But I think from our perspective, we've always worked really close with the government and making sure that, we're doing the best to deliver on affordable homes, whether that's as private purchase, shared ownership, or even like affordable rentals. We are there to try and deliver on as much as we can from our side on those numbers. As a developer, we've always been about regeneration as well. So actually, compared to some developers that, don't focus on like really difficult sites, like a gas holder or a chocolate factory, like that we've delivered in Slough, some developers don't have the expertise or the capability to take on those types of projects. And that's where regeneration comes into play, because we're never going to get to those numbers if we're concentrating on greenfield land. Yes, there's loads of it, but that takes away from something else. That's where the regeneration comes into play, and where we're really focusing our efforts on, building on communities within existing communities. Because if we don't do that, there's no chance in achieving the numbers that we need for new homes in the UK.
But have you felt anything come from down up top to actually make your lives easier to actually build more?
I think working closer with us to make sure that we get the right planning consents in place on whether that's the amount of properties on a parcel of land or the types of properties that they're right for those locations. So there is a lot more help coming to make those decisions and get decisions quicker. Probably the timescales on the decisions is an aspect that's changed.
Agreed.
What about selling off plan? Do you see much of that happening these days?
What do you mean by selling off plan? Sorry.
So selling sort of off plan units. So someone buying something, they, contract reassignments and all that kind of stuff. Much anymore?
Yeah. It's something that we actually stopped doing for a period of time, but have reintroduced, to be honest. I think that the more people the type of people that use it generally are more the overseas purchasers that haven't actually seen the product, etc., and are probably with longer lead times to the property being ready, actually the capital growth might have increased or something of that nature, and they're like, actually, I don't need the property anymore, or I've changed my mind and I want a different location compared to this location. So that comes into play from that side.
Yeah.
Less so from a UK purchaser, because generally a UK purchaser, and even in the market where people have started to come out of London, they go into that location because they want to be in that location, and they've done enough education on that to make the decision that I'm settling here.
And also from a mortgage perspective, mortgage lenders don't like contract reassignments, unfortunately.
Indeed.
So less
more of your investor.
Yeah, less popular than it was a few years ago. You've talked a lot, obviously, about overseas buyers and all that kind of stuff, and you see the amount of sort of hopeful regeneration that's going on in the UK in terms of new builds and stuff. You compare that to a place like the US over in Dubai. Obviously, you've been in the UK, you've obviously been overseas as well.
Yeah.
How do the two sort of compare in terms of how we're doing, in terms of what we're hopefully trying to build, compared to what's going on in some of these other countries that are building some of the stuff over there?
I think the key difference between the UK market to some of these other markets is the stability in the market. I think that there's a lot going on in the world right now. And I think, obviously, from an investor perspective, Dubai is a very topical subject. If you look on social media, it's everywhere. Then you can't get away from it, especially with like UK people moving to Dubai for this, amazing life. And I think that, that's great. That's all for them. But one thing that keeps investment coming into the UK consistently from overseas is that stability in the market. These other countries like Dubai has been there historically, where it's had really huge peaks and it's taken really huge drops.
Yeah.
And actually, you saw people exit the country quite quickly. The UK market overall, and it's not just London, it's just generally, like, there's always a really nice steady flow of capital growth appreciation. And even when we have seen the hikes in interest rates, etc., I think a lot of people thought the market was going to massively drop. That's it. All values are going down. Okay, yes, there were calls off in the market. There were some drops, but overall, it was fairly stable when you compare it against other markets of a similar capacity. So, that keeps the investment coming through. It's tougher in certain stages, with a lot of noise in other countries like Dubai. Obviously, they are looking at both, but I don't ever think there's going to be a situation, I hope, touch wood, that people really sort of turn off and they don't want to buy into the UK because they see it as a stable investment overall.
Do you see many, obviously, you obviously see it from a overseas buyers investing in here. Do you see many going the opposite way and people investing in places like Dubai or out there?
I think that more over the last 18 months, there's obviously been a huge draft in UK people wanting to move overseas.
Yeah.
I think like with the Dubai market as it is, it seems, it's taken a really big turn towards big returns, and I can go get this amazing job in the sun, and I don't think that's ever going to turn off, but it has turned up in the most recent years. Although we are seeing a slight shift in some people returning. I think some people are made and they love going out to have this high life and this new life that they haven't had in the UK, and new weather naturally, but actually it's really hard for people when they're separated from their families, and we are seeing a lot of people that are drafting back to come back to reality in some instances.
Yeah.
Sounds terrible, but that's the way I put it. I'll keep it like that.
Fair enough. Where do you see sort of new build going in the next sort of 3 to 5 years? Are there any sort of big changes that you feel are going to come? Or
to be honest, I think that new build is always going to have a place in the market, and certainly from my perspective at Berkeley, because we focus on regeneration, there's always going to be aspects of regeneration that we can deliver going through the years. We also don't just focus on knocking down something to build some apartments or houses. We're converting factories into beautiful apartments like the Horlicks Quarter in Slough. That was a chocolate factory, and actually we didn't actually have to keep that the factory in situ. We had the chimney is grade 2 listed, and the statue that's next to it, but the factory wasn't. We retained it because it's a part of history there. And so with more land like that coming through, factories closing down, etc., there's always going to be a place in the market for
I was
people.
going to say, what's been your favourite regeneration project?
I love regeneration because I love history. I love retaining that element of something old and making it into something new that's usable in today's day and age, and that people can enjoy. And also seeing part of that history come back. I mean, recently, like last year, we saw that the Horlicks brothers come back and visit the Horlicks Quarter, and like genuine tears in their eyes to see actually this amazing factory built in 1908 transformed into something that's actually beautiful, and people are loving it there. It's got a cafe, it's got residence facilities, a beautiful terrace that looks at the old Horlicks red sign. Those regenerations are just like the heartwarming for me, and I love being part of it.
Rather than being derelict or even knocked down and just sat there all shabby and and
even on the Bath site that we're due to launch in a minute, like that's an old gas holder site, and whilst there wasn't anything usable on the site, just to see that come through and be something amazing again, and like a beautiful ecological park on the riverside with apartments looking over it, and it just be something brand new, but still retain that bit of heritage, whether that's on our marketing branding, whether that's on the facade of the property. We try and keep as much of those like little like nods to history in there.
Yeah. If Alan was buying his first property today, what would be your number one focus, first of all?
I suppose my motivation is slightly different. I've got 2 children, so my motivation would probably be towards a house. I alluded to when I came through the door earlier, I love living outside of London. I live quite close to Reading, and actually as a location, it's just so well connected, but the value for money on outside of London at the moment is really important to me. I want a really good balance, being able to come into London and go to neighbouring cities like Bath or up to Manchester, etc., and that be commutable, but not be immersed in it. For my children, it's all about having a balance on lifestyle. They've got the outside space to enjoy. I've got a pub down the road that I can go to on a weekend if I really want to and have a nice meal. And it's got great schools. Education's a massive thing, so it's being next to those sort of establishments that are going to be good for my growth and my children's growth as well.
Fair enough. Perfect. I've got a couple of sort of quick fire questions to kind of throw at you.
Okay.
I'm not going to put you on the spot too much, Alan, don't worry. What's the biggest myth about a new build?
That the price is going to be well beyond the market value.
Yeah.
And whilst we've alluded to it earlier that there are some increases on value, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. We actually do look at market value and consider it.
Okay. What's the most underrated benefit?
The fact that you're the first person to be in that home, that it's your home. You're the first person to make it your own.
Biggest buy mistake?
Oh,
it's too many to choose, I think.
Be careful.
Making uninformed decisions when purchasing your property.
What's the biggest financial mistake?
Not seeking the right advice before you make a decision to purchase the property and put your offer in.
And when is the best time? When would you feel is the best time for someone to have that conversation about finance?
At day one.
Day one.
Yeah. From the moment that you consider that actually I've got a deposit, and at that point in time, you need to start speaking to financial advisors to make sure, one, your deposit is the right level, and also that you can afford the monthly payments for that property. And then you're going out into a property market, whether that's new build or secondhand, and you're looking at the right homes, because expectations, if you don't seek that advice now, are too high in some instances, and it's really hard to bring someone back from thinking they can afford a bigger property than actually they've got the finances to consider for.
Perfect. And what's the best advice for someone that's considering a new build?
Make sure you do your research on the location, the development, and what it has to offer for you as a wider picture, whether that's a sense of community, whether that's facilities. Just do your research on the wider location rather than just the property itself, because I think it's really easy for us to fixate on, is that property the right size? And actually you just need to consider what that has to offer you in the future as a development.
Okay. Just before we finish then, is there anything, what's something that you're genuinely very optimistic about in the future with new builds?
I think I'm most optimistic about what we can give back and to the UK. And I think that, again, that does depend on the developer. But from my perspective and working for the developer I work for, it's the delivery back to the UK and what it can do for the people that are going to live on these developments, and being part of like the bigger picture of the UK and building on making like Britain great, and continuing that legacy.